Naja, how do you define constructive journalism?
Oh, that's a very big question, and I've thought about it a lot because I mean, I don't see classic journalism as destructive, but still I recognize that there are elements of our kind of habitual way of doing journalism that needs some more constructive elements. So for me, it's about making the journalism better and make sure that it includes what you could call constructive angles and aspects and perspective in a story, not only looking for the problems, but also looking for the solutions, not only holding power to account, but also listening to, many people with power are also visionary people that want to do something in society and make sure that you kind of get both sides of the story in the story. So for me, it's about an approach where you're critical and curious at the same time.
And that is a wider definition of journalism than some people have been used to. Did you find that you had any trouble in spreading the message about that within the BBC?
No, not really. To be fair, I joined the BBC 1.5 years ago, and BBC News has been working with this element for some years, as has a lot of other media organizations in the world. Because I think we both, as professionals, could feel that this is very bleak. Is the world only bad, or is there also stuff happening that actually is inspirational and hope inspiring? And the other thing is that our research at the BBC has proven again and again over the last years that the audiences really want to hear the elements of stories that gives us hope, that are looking forward, that are inspiring, that is pointing to solutions. So I think it has kind of been both us doing journalism and the audiences that have kind of been I don't know, maybe become increasingly aware that we need to be better at that part of journalism.
As you say, the BBC has been working on this for several years. I think they call it solutions-focused journalism, which is basically the same as what we understand as constructive journalism. But do you think the BBC could have started doing that earlier? What was the catalyst? That was it the was it the
What is it? Yeah, I think what is difficult here is that we know that we as human beings, we are very attracted to scandal, drama, and negative stories. That let's face it, the reason why all media have got record traffic numbers during the pandemic is also because we are somehow strangely attracted to fear and stuff that is frightening us. So I think for many years the kind of maybe overly focus on negative aspects of news development has been something where you could see a huge appetite from many audiences. So I think it has been kind of just naturally evolving, and also in combination with one of our core tasks that is to be critical and to hold power to account. But if you only do that, report on negative developments, and if you're overly critical towards everything you hear, you might end up, uh, not telling about the substance of the story, the interesting thing in the story, but only talk about kind of the critical edges you can find. And could BBC News have discovered this before? I think we maybe all could, the past 20 years.
In introducing this new kind of journalism, have you had any opposition within the BBC? I'm thinking now of old dogs who've, in the world of journalism, who are used to doing things a totally different way, used to doing it the old way, and they have perhaps some trouble in adapting to this new kind of journalism.
Um, but yes and no, because I would say I see a lot of this type of journalism made by journalists of all ages. I think it is maybe something else that we've had a culture that were so strong that if you were kind of had done it for some years and you want to prove that you were a real professional, you might not dare open up to these angles in a story. And I think as we've talked more about it, I think all of our journalists feel empowered to include these elements in their stories. And that is a development I would say we've gone through in BBC News. It started out as something we would kind of do in a corner, where we would do initiatives like crossing divides. And now it's kind of an integral part of how we think about journalism. So if you look at our news strategy, we're talking about 5 types of stories, and one of the types is solution focused journalism. Because we think it is not only hope inspiring, interesting to read about, we also think it is often quite useful information. For instance, it is what is going on with the vaccine, when is it coming. It's not only the critical elements of that story that are interesting, it's also quite interesting to follow the progress.
It's also interesting that when the BBC uh, talks about solutions driven journalism or constructive journalism, they don't use that phrase. They tend to use themes like crossing divides, which you just mentioned, which of course are based on constructive journalism. But the BBC doesn't come out with a grand statement and say, we as the BBC are now embracing this thing called constructive journalism. It's almost constructive journalism by stealth. Is there any reason for that?
I wouldn't. I would politely disagree with you, because we announced our new news strategy, which is called Modernizing BBC News, in January. And it is actually one of the core elements of that, is that we know that they need to know what is going on in the world that is preoccupying. They need to know the nuances and complications of that. We are going to pursue truth, with all its nuances. But by doing that, it is really important that we include everything that is also positive, that it gives us hope, that does show progress. And so I think it has actually moved from being maybe a subculture to be something we consider being an essential part of modern journalism.
And do you get feedback now from your audiences actually saying, we've noticed the difference, thanks very much, we're enjoying it?
It's journalists are not often praised by the public in that way. We can see that it is highly appreciated. We get that feedback when we test these elements. We can see the numbers for stories that have these elements are big. We can see during this pandemic we have had very direct feedback from the audiences asking for more stories that could give them some hope and give them some guidance, and tell them, what to worry about, not what, and what not to worry about. It's let's face it, modern life, because of, partly due to the internet, we are living in a stream of information, and for many of us, it is a bit overwhelming and too much at times. And you need somebody to point to where the important part of the information is, and that is both the more critical part, things that are not working, PPE or testing systems that are not working, but it's actually also the opposite.
And has constructive journalism changed the way that you select and plan news stories?
I would say that I've seen, I've been a journalist as an editor for the better part of 25 years now. And I can see a huge difference in how, not least our younger colleagues, you were talking about age, but it seems to be perfectly natural for the younger generations of our colleagues to always look for these elements as well. It's almost like they're not afraid of also talking about what is working well. And to me, an example could be if we're sitting in an editorial meeting and we talk too much around something that has a lot of problems in it, then somebody would, as the most natural thing in the world, just begin adding some of the other elements to the discussion. And to me, that is a new culture compared to how it was in most of the business maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
So basically, there is more explanation in constructive journalism. There's a greater understanding for the viewer or listener. To what extent has that been adopted as a counter to the sound bites of social media?
Uh, I I'm actually not sure that social media is because those sound bites, they can be both, they can be, a lot of them are misleading, or kind of fantasy, and some of it is propaganda, some are is opinion, and some are pieces of information. And just as journalism, the angle and perspective of these posts, however short they are, can be more nuanced or more constructive, or they can be aimed at just sowing divide, and misunderstanding, disinformation. So I don't really think. I think it's a new way of communicating, and of course the fragmentation of information in social media is sometimes making it difficult to kind of see what context this piece of information belongs to.
That's exactly the point that I'm getting at, because in social media, if you live your life by social media, you have a fragmented view often of the world out there. Whereas what you are doing with constructive journalism is basically saying you want to really understand a story, come to us, come to the BBC or any of the other outlets that are
Mm.
using constructive journalism.
I would say I think if you look at how people are using, getting the information, for especially people that are under 50, I'm 52, people that are younger than me, they would have a very, very daily mix of social media updates and also journalism, and they would also get information from other sources as well. And they are, it's kind of the everyday life to kind of navigate between all these different things. And I think what social media is very good at is to spark a conversation and connect people that would not be connected before. What it is obviously very, very bad at is to kind of curate and edit in an editorial sense, because that's not the purpose of the algorithms, and it's also not the purpose of many of the postings that you see different people make on social media. Because many people want to post their opinions without being countered with facts, for instance, and so they're slightly different. And I take and it's not to downplay some of the more preoccupying sides of what social media has meant for our level of information. But I think there's quite good research from, for instance, Reuters Institute of the Study of Journalism, showing that people through social media actually get to a more diverse set of perspectives than ever before. Remember when my grandmom, she only read one newspaper, and that was a newspaper supporting the Conservative Party of Denmark, and she read that one newspaper her entire life. I would hope that most people living in the modern media world will have access to more sources than one.
Can you see any downside at all to constructive journalism?
I think the problem is when constructive journalism is a proxy for just kind of doing uh, opinionated communication dressed up as journalism. If it is used as a means to kind of try to promote a specific political or societal development, and then it looks like journalism, but and it is called constructive, but actually it's trying to push people in a specific direction. I think this is where it becomes a bit where to me it stops being journalism and begins edging towards advocacy, or propaganda, in the fine of the scale. And I think that is maybe a challenge to us, that you see also state actors have been using the term constructive journalism to kind of actually just to further geopolitical interests.
Now, constructive journalism is, of course, geared towards solutions, but in order to report the solution, you have to describe the problem that required the solution in the first place. Do you think that this last year with COVID-19, we have seen the ultimate in frightening negative stories, but have we also seen a coming of age of constructive journalism, in that it has been looking for things that are going right in this situation and attempts to end the situation just as much as reporting things that are going wrong?
I think you might have a really strong point here, because if we look at our numbers, as many others, we have seen really huge traffic. A lot of people have been viewing our television programs. Our online offers have had record numbers, not only from Britain, but obviously from our global audiences. So, and we are talking like 160 million views of our explainers. It's this in this realm. It's kind of really a lot of audiences, and we can see they look for solid, easy to understand, but accurate and impartial information. They're looking for updates in our big live pages. And what we've done there is we've kind of, I think our live pages, we have developed them quite a bit. So they're not only updating with the latest piece of news that is happening, but we are injecting live analysis and context and explanation, reality check into the same feed. And they've been absolute blockbusters for us. And the second thing has been kind of explanation that in graphic, visual, and ways, and text explains the basics of the disease and the work with the vaccine and stuff like that. And then we've done quite a bit of involving the audiences, listening to their questions, basing our reporting on what we got from the audiences. And interestingly enough, some of the things that we can see there also have been in huge interest in is people that are managing kind of despite the crisis, that are finding solutions, that are helping each other out. Stuff like that is also something that the audience is very interested in.
And in general terms, do you think that in 5 to 10 years' time, constructive journalism will be absolutely central and mainstream? Do you think in fact, it's heading that way now?
I hope so, but I think we have to remember, coming back to this, as human beings, we are, there's a reason why crime stories are so popular. we like, we like to there is something, and it's also a little individual. Some people are more kind of attracted to the fright than others. So I think we have to work hard actually to develop our journalism to be as rich as it is supposed to be and as nuanced as it should be, because I think the natural instinct will maybe lead us towards putting a high emphasis on scandal, corruption, death, war, disaster, all of that, because we will always get huge audiences to that. So I think this has to be, we need to do a deliberate effort to keep doing all of it. And the good news, of course, is when we do all of it, we can see the audiences respond really well to it. Because let's not forget that overly negative news curation is one of the reasons why a lot of people have kind of given a little bit up on journalism, because they feel disempowered and, frankly speaking, depressed, if they're following news. And I think that's kind of maybe, for me, the biggest reason to be open about how we can develop journalism, because journalism that the audiences are not consuming, to me, is really halfway house. I am here to make sure everybody can be informed and make up their own mind. And if they're not consuming it, I haven't really completed my job, I think.
So the challenge is to get the message out that you are now providing a balanced kind of journalism, which will give people the negative stories with the required emphasis when appropriate, but you will also give them the positive news about what is happening in the world, so they don't feel that the world is going down a plug hole all the time.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I think it's not only about the type of stories, because sometimes it's like the stories are either negative or positive. I think it's more kind of the approach from us, the journalists. And one of the things I think we need to do is being more transparent about how we do our stories. How do we come about the information we've got? What have we been curious about? What have we explored? And that means I think we have to be more transparent and showcase some of our workings in a way we have not had to do before, because people just believed in us, once upon a time. Now everybody is questioning us as they're questioning all institutions. And that, I think, for us required, it's almost kind of a modern authority. what is a modern authority, a modern leader? That is somebody who is transparent and trustworthy, where people think they deserve the trust. We can't really take it for granted anymore, I think.
Finally, on a personal level, have you always been a convert to constructive journalism, or was there a Damascene moment when you suddenly said, this is the kind of journalism I want to be associated with for the rest of my life?
Uh, I was, I think I want to be associated with good journalism, and to me, the constructive is an element of that. It's not. I mean, for me, it's really important that we also shed light on stuff that somebody wants to hide, and that we show just how problematic different things are. That is just as important for me, and that we report without fear or no favor. Every aspect of society, but to come back to a question, in the beginning, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, where this discussion began, I think in the beginning I was a bit skeptical because I was afraid that this would lead to a type of advocacy communication, as I talked about, before, like stories that should convince people that they ought to be like this or like that, or ought to do this or that. And I'm really adamantly against journalism trying to tell people what to think and what to do. I really believe that people should have the freedom to make up their own mind based on information and facts. So I struggled with that in the beginning, and then I realized that this is not about trying to kind of convey a specific way of thinking. It's about not leaving out really important elements of reality.
So basically, what you're saying is that constructive journalism is part of the evolutionary process within journalism itself, that it's found the right time to do the right things for the audience.
Yes, and I think there are some things in the bigger structural developments that are helping us here, because let's not forget they're very big move towards a very negative, news, scandal-led news. That was kind of coming in connection with the 24/7 news channels, or with the internet, where all sorts of publishers try to do whatever they could to get attention. And as I said before, as we human beings are kind of led towards fear and drama, that was kind of a natural, I think, development that you would always find some fire to film, because you needed footage 24/7. And then I think there has been a second phase where we've become mature in this, because of course the news are on 24/7, but that does not mean that we shouldn't make very considerate editorial choices about what we are prioritizing and how we are conveying the stories.
Naja, thank you very much for talking to us. Very interesting, fascinating, and good luck with the BBC.